bright and early. We just roasted some coffee. Now we're going to share some insights about border crossing with you. How's the coffee?
Delicious.
Freshly roasted.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Say good morning. Are you showing them your new shirts? What's that? Is that his nose? Yeah. So hot topic today, border crossing.
But we thought we'd give you our perspective on when we've crossed the border, what that's been like from crossing from the U.S. into Mexico. So both times we did it through Laredo, but it really depends on what time you are going through the border.
The first time, I probably lost a month's worth of sleep. The idea of taking my family across the border. I was super terrified of it. I heard every horror story underneath the sun, and granted, there's probably validity to it. So when we crossed the border, we were pretty freaked out, especially because we were doing it with our 5 kids. But things didn't turn out the way that we had expected. We were traveling with our animals, and our dog is 70 pounds. And because of the time of the year and because of the type of breed he is, we could not fly him. And so we had no other choice other than to drive him across the border to take him with us. Found this really, really nice neighborhood in Laredo and slept there for probably a total of 4 hours. Got up, loaded the van, and went across the border. It was still dark, so it was pretty early. And we were completely freaked out. I was driving, and we crossed the first bridge. We pay, I think, $3 American. And I had asked the guy, do I need pesos when I enter into Mexico to pay the next toll? And he said, you're in Mexico. And I was like, oh, okay. And then there's like red light, green light. So we went through there. It was green, and the guy was just waving us through. Like, I could not drive fast enough. And before we knew it, we were in Mexico. We were at the Oxxo. On the other side, it was very surreal.
Yeah, it was super fast. Like, it was crazy. Like, we talked to those 2 people only. One person to pay the toll. The other person we didn't talk to. They just waved us through, and that was it. There was no one else there. Like, it was so early in the morning that we just crossed right through. No one looked in our van. No one even noticed who we were. And we drive a big Ford Transit, so we were noticeable, but they just pushed us right through. And
I even drove in the wrong lane. There's a lane that you can go in if you have like a pass, if you go regularly. We don't have the pass. And they just waved us through. It was
very surreal. It was very surreal.
Yeah, it was the exact opposite of what we were expecting.
And because our car title hadn't arrived yet, because the government was backlogged in printing it by 8 weeks, and there was a paper shortage, so we didn't have the title, so we couldn't actually drive our car into Mexico. So I had to then drop everybody off at a little, it's like a 7-Eleven, but it's Oxxo. So I dropped my family off into someone else who came to pick us up, a similar type car, loaded it up with their animals and family, and then I drove back into America, which took a really long time. It was probably at least an hour and a half I was sitting back, getting back in. That's early in the morning. It was a huge line, a ton of cars merging into, it was probably like 8 different gates that you could go through. Lots of questions. It was much harder to get back into America than it was this time to get into Mexico. And then there were multiple checkpoints. Once I got into Mexico, multiple checkpoints along the way through Texas.
Into the U.S.
Once I got into the U.S., there's multiple checkpoints. They just ask questions like, is there anyone else, any other adults in your car? That kind of looked around and poked, and it was very strange.
The car was empty.
Yeah, it was
completely
totally
empty.
Yeah, so it was just me. So I didn't have a problem. They checked me out and then they drove by, but it was just bizarre. Like, there were so many checkpoints.
He crossed the border, and then he thought he was on his way, and then there was another checkpoint beyond the border.
Yeah. So my family gets dropped off. They all load into this other vehicle, and then off they go, heading on a 12-hour road trip down into the heart of Mexico. And I drive back up into Texas, park the car into our long-term parking, get an Uber to the airport, get on my flight, and I fly to meet them there. And we all get back to the destination about the same time.
So the second time, we flew back up to Texas. Sage and I were going to try to do it on our own. We decided that was probably not a good idea. So we
all 7 of us flew to Texas. There's another video. We'll put a link to it here so you can watch the video of us landing in Texas during the ice storm. The day the ice storm lands, everything shuts down. We have to then rent a car to be able to go drive, pick up Luce, and then get our Ford Transit, Ferdinand, and then drive Ferdinand back down. So then we finally got back to the border crossing.
Feel a little more confident crossing the border. We still don't know what to expect, but we were a little more confident. Kids and I had driven through Mexico at this point. We were passengers. So I wasn't as scared.
We got a later start and we were driving from San Antonio. So it's 2 hours from San Antonio to Laredo. So we already were driving for 2 hours before we got to the border. And so we got there much later in the day. The sun was up, massive lines, cars are already kind of pulled to the side getting inspected. So it was a completely different experience this time.
Completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first security guard comes up and asks those questions. And then we proceed to drive. Well, actually, when we got there, we went through the same wrong passageway again.
Because the first time we didn't know what that lane was for. So our thought was, well, it worked well the first time, so let's do it again.
But it didn't. So then they had to reroute us out through.
Stop traffic. We stopped traffic. We drove into Mexico.
Across 4 lanes of traffic.
They opened up this wall. We drove through the wall and then they rerouted us back into
Laredo in Texas. And then we had to go back through the process again. So now we're kind of like bugged out, like this huge white transit van. It's like totally everyone sees us and knows us. So we rerouted back through, and a security guard asked us if we had, what we had in the van. And we go through that person, and then we go through to another checkpoint.
We paid our $3 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I look down as I'm handing her the money, and I'm literally like shaking. I'm so flustered from like doing the U-turn through Mexico, getting routed back into Texas, going through it again. We just realized at that point it was going to be a completely different border crossing.
Yeah, totally. Then you get to the red light, green light, and we're red.
Of course.
And so then we get waved over to an area where we have to park, and they ask me to hop out and open up the back. And they start taking out backpacks and putting their hands into bags, and another officer is walking through the car, inside of it, looking through the car to see what we have inside of it, and asking some questions, and very, very kind, very sweet people.
Our car is loaded down at this point. We have the stuff that we left in Texas the first time. We loaded up our car. I have all my rugs. I mean, our car is loaded down. That plus our whole family. Like we were packed in there. We were ready for this road trip. We'd collected everything that we had wanted, that we had missed for the past 4 months.
4 months.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was so packed down, they weren't about to disassemble the entire packing job. Like that was like almost like a good thing, because they just kind of looked in. Not that we were hiding anything, but they were just looking in the backpacks that were on the periphery of everything that we had. And so I think that made things a little bit easier, although they were probably fairly suspicious, but they just put their hands deep into all the bags, looking to see if there was something, metallic or hard or illegal in any of the bags. So
they were super sweet.
Mm-hmm.
They were asking us like where we live, and we were doing our best to answer the questions, and I think they were more curious.
Yeah. What drew the most attention was everything was in luggage or in some sort of Tupperware. But the thing that was most curious was at the bottom far right was a cardboard box. But they were ready to cut that box open and get into there because that was what they were most curious about. And luckily, the label of what was inside of it, my son's RC car, was written in Sharpie on the back, so I was able to tell him what it was. He felt comfortable enough then to reach his hand inside and feel that it was a plastic vehicle, and that was enough to subside him. But if he slashed it open, he probably would have cut the car too, because those cars have a very thin body on them, so that would have been slashed. But
He said his whole face changed when he saw the box.
yeah,
He's very patient and kind and understanding, and then as soon as he saw that cardboard box, he took his knife and went boop.
yep.
And he was excited and ready to
He was ready to go.
it was like Christmas morning.
And then that was it. They said, okay, you're free to go.
Yeah.
And then we drove, and it was the day's drive was 16 hours. We were going pretty far south into Mexico. So it was a hard drive because we were just hauling. But it's a paid toll road pretty much the entire way. And so it was very safe and uneventful. I know we've had some friends that have had some issues on the road, but we didn't have any issues. We just drove. It was just a lot of driving.
We made a point not to stop. We stopped for, I think, 3 bathroom breaks. We had packed all of our lunch, all of our meals the night before. Everyone had their brown paper sacks full of snacks to hold them over. A friend told us about this really cool crock pot sort of thing. It's all fabric. You plug it in. We had bought a frozen lasagna, and stuck it on there. And I think after 4 hours, it warms it all up, so we didn't really need to stop for warm food. I think we had hoped that we were going to make a stop, but we just drove. I think we stopped once because our youngest started throwing up. We got stuck behind that rollover car accident, so we were just stopped on the road for an hour at least, just waiting to go by. And then our son proceeded to get sick, so we stopped. After that, got everything cleaned up, and I think that was our longest stop. And I think it was half hour.
Mm-hmm. We brought a little baby toilet, and so the little ones could use that.
I don't remember having to use that much, do you?
I mean, it just made the stops faster.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because you didn't have to go find the restroom. We had one big restroom break where we all went, but otherwise we had the tiny little toilet. It totally helped save the day.
Mm-hmm.
That and the little crock pot. This thing was awesome. It was so good.
We used it all the way through the U.S. Every day we'd stop and grab something to put in our crock pot, so we'd have a hot meal halfway through the day.
It was so good.
It was so good. Good job, Brianna.
The first time we crossed over the border, our whole family said a prayer as we were going through the border crossing, and I filmed a lot of the border crossing through the south part of Laredo, through the border crossing, and then into Mexico. And then when I was driving back through Texas, I filmed those stops as well. And I sent some of them in text to Sarah so she could see them. And then later on, when we were looking at the footage we had, it all had been uploaded to the iCloud. I used my phone, and they were all missing. All the footage from Laredo to Nuevo Laredo, all gone. It's like it was a black hole in my phone. So I don't have a lot of footage to be able to share. So we're talking through what we did, but it was all missing. It all just disappeared, including the texts.
Yeah, everything.
It's really strange.
It's a bummer because the first time we crossed, it was at nighttime and it was very dramatic.
But they're all facing the same way. It's a bummer because it was so dramatic.
Yeah. Oh, we just kept on rolling.
They just kept rolling.
Okay.
I'll cut it. It's fine.
That's fine. So the first time it was super dramatic. There's these little blackbirds, and there are thousands of them on the lines, telephone lines, before you even cross. It's just a completely different feeling, and because we were on edge, it was very eerie because there was just thousands of birds like lining the streets as you're like, hitting each stoplight. And it was dark. We're a little freaked out, and these birds are just like deafening. It was really cool.
It was really cool.
It was made for a really cool video. Sorry, guys.
Totally. Such a bummer.
So the second time we didn't film. The first hour's drive crossing from the border into Mexico, it's a lot of traffic, a lot of trucks. There's more trucks than there are cars. And so the first time was terrifying for the kids and I because we were not on the toll roads.
And you weren't driving, you had a hired driver. So someone who was like a professional driver driving. He was a
professional.
And so he was hauling and he was weaving and bobbing and passing, and he was gonna get you guys there fast.
Yeah.
So I think that made it intimidating.
Yeah.
Plus you weren't on the toll road, you were on a side road.
I was there alone with the kids.
Yeah.
We were driving back.
Having a good time, driving in America. You guys are racing through massive semis passing. I actually wasn't there, so I don't know, but that's what I heard.
It was terrifying. And I think the part that was terrifying was that my kids were still recovering from being in a head-on collision. And so that was top of mind. By the time I think that first hour, I looked at my daughter and she was bugged out. Like, she was terrified. I was terrified. I was texting Ken, telling him how terrified I was. And it was the first hour. But that was the worst of it. After that, it was much better.
But we all got to do the drive the second time. It is a beautiful drive.
It is a gorgeous drive.
The mountains. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. There's huge valleys and there's so much to look at and see, and each town has its own different like character and flavor. It's very cool.
It was fun. It was fun making the drive with you.
Yeah. There are a lot of semis. Like, there is a lot of import and export happening on all those roads. But never felt scary.
Maybe once.
It's crazy.
It's Mexico. There's no rules. If you're driving in Mexico, just get out of the way of the truckers.
And don't drive at nighttime.
And don't drive at nighttime. It's horrible. Yeah. It was super terrible. The idea of driving into Mexico was super terrifying. The first time was terrifying for a long time. It stressed me out. The second time, I wasn't as stressed. We were definitely cautious, and we made sure that we knew where we were going to stop. We made sure those towns were the safer towns. You just have to be smart about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Do your research, talk to people. But ultimately, all the fear and anxiety we had leading up to it, you didn't have any control anyway. Like, you just have to go through the crossing and you have to just get to the other side. And so I just think that we lost a lot of sleep and stress and anxiety for something we probably didn't have to worry too much about. It's just everyone else was telling us how scary it is. And I think that caused us then to have more anxiety than we needed to. So I've been watching this video. Border crossing. Be smart, be safe, be honest. Do your research, but don't lose sleep over it. Don't listen to all the people who are saying there's so many bad things. Yeah, bad things happen, but thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of people cross into the border every day. And there's massive lines of cars and trucks. So they know what they're doing. They're going to move you through.
So what are your thoughts? Are you planning on crossing the border anytime soon? Like and subscribe. See you next week.